This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Melissa Hogan, and we are going to talk about loving your babies well, even if they have been hurt by a toxic relationship or a previous relationship you were in. What do you do about it? We know we feel guilty. We know we don't. We know we see things that need to happen. But how do we see everything without having blinders on of trying to protect ourselves or our own egos and then love them well? So Melissa, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Well, I'm good. And Melissa and I discovered that we live pretty close to each other, which I talk to people in literally all over the world. So to even find someone somewhere near me is just so unusual. So we're already like hometown girls together.
This is going to be fun.
It is going to be fun. Why don't you tell people a bit of, why this topic is important to you and a bit about your story?
Yeah. So I was married for 21 years. I have 3 children. They're 14, 16, and 17 now, all boys. My youngest has special needs. So that is very, challenging in itself, extensive medical needs. I was a healthcare lawyer before they were born and a little bit while they were young. And then I did a lot of work in my son's disease and a nonprofit there. But underlying all of this and their entire lives and a lot of my life was a very toxic marriage. Lots of deception, infidelity, control, abandonment, gaslighting, lots of stuff like that. And, the difficult part is that I think everybody's had that experience where they slowly open their eyes and go, what in the world am I living in? And if you realize the effect that that's had on you as an adult and trying to come out of that as an adult, the effect on developing brains and children is so much more complex, and trying to support that and help that and undo that is just its own challenge, separate and apart from you trying to heal from the effects of that.
And you leading the way is absolutely important too. Like, as I was hearing you speak, because sometimes I see two sides of the coin. And sometimes it's like parents focus on their children and kind of avoid their own work. And then sometimes people, oh, the kids seem fine. And then it's like, and
Right.
so it's a both and, right?
The key is, you have to heal yourself. That has to be the priority, because ultimately you can't heal your children. That's the hard part, and part of in your own healing you have to come to accept is you cannot heal your children. But you have to do your best to heal yourself and, get therapy and free resources and things like that, so you can support them in the best way you can and help them, understand what's happened. I look at it and say, there's, for children especially, there's the trauma that has happened, and they have lots of effects of trauma, but then there's also ingrained behaviors that, as they have developed and grown, they've learned this as their norm, and you've taken it in as your norm. So, undoing that, deprogramming that for yourself, obviously is the most important, so you can help support them and lead them to hopefully, eventually as adults deprogram a lot of this stuff.
And I think about, because it's always the question, like, do I stay or go in regards to the kids, right? Is it best to stay and protect them from that, within that
Right.
scenario, or is it best to leave and protect them in that scenario? And the children, like adult children, I've interviewed a lot of people who, let's say 25, okay, about that age group, kind of mid-20.
Mhm.
So not full adults yet, but kind of enough where they could speak in reflection. And they said, when my mom got out or when my dad got out, there were both scenarios.
Mhm.
No, they couldn't protect me what was from happening at the other parent's house, but the water I was swimming in wasn't always dirty. You
Yeah,
know, like
that's a great analogy.
yeah, it was like at some point I got to like it wasn't my whole normal, it wasn't my whole life. Like sometimes there was clean water.
Right. And I think modeling, healing yourself so you can model healthy behavior, especially boundaries, which become really difficult. I think some of the twisting that happens, and at least what happened to me was that boundaries are then framed as controlling. So it's this
Yeah,
really,
yeah, yeah.
reverse psychology. And so becoming confident in yourself, like the work that you do, I mean, becoming confident in where you are, that no, this is what's healthy, and modeling that for your kids, even in the face of a lot of pushback, is really the goal.
I was talking to someone in education, and they were talking about healing from this, and I said, I've never heard anyone say I had a really confident, emotionally healthy mother who had good boundaries with herself and others and good boundaries with us, good boundaries with the kids. And, she found the balance in being, taking care of herself and protecting herself, but then showing up for others too. And she would just have this calm spirit about her because she knew who she was. It really just damaged me. I think I need therapy because my mother was just doing so well. I mean, no one says that. Like literally no one says that. But as women, we have this like piece in our head of like, oh, I'm selfish if I heal, or I'm not, if I'm not spending money or focusing on my kids, that I'm doing something bad. And it's like I'll never forget a woman, and it's very sad. I mean, she was trying to decide if she was going to do something to help herself and through this healing process or send her kid to space camp.
Mm,
Okay. And I understand the difficulty of that conversation.
yeah.
And I want to say, no, I've had a lot of conversation with adults, and no one ever says, I'm in therapy because my mom didn't send me to space camp. But they will say, I'm in therapy because I'm depressed. My
Right.
mom was depressed. I had terrible, health relationships modeled for me. I had terrible self-care modeled for me. My mom was always at the end of her rope. Like these things do have long-term effects, right? We just
I
kind of
think
forget.
there was a revelation to me at some point a few years before the end, and it was in the course of, I had a book come out this year on trauma, but on a separate type of trauma called medical trauma. But in the course of researching for that book and writing that, the revelation that self-care is not selfish. And again, that's another lie that is spun to us, that somehow that's selfish to take care of your own mental health, to have good boundaries. And part of caring for ourselves and learning and therapy is also to reduce all of those triggers. So if you've been in this toxic relationship for a long time, you're going to be triggered by a ton of behaviors, and I have been. And some of those behaviors, especially if those were programmed into your children, you're going to be triggered by the behaviors of your children. And it's really hard to heal if you're still in a lot of that same environment. So caring for yourself intentionally, through therapy, through, if you can't afford therapy, books, podcasts like yours, and there's support groups at your local domestic violence shelter that are free. And then tons of, YouTube videos. Doing that can help reduce all of that to stop this terrible cycle. Even if your kids or other people in your life don't choose or aren't able to heal yet.
What's fascinating, and I am not a male basher. I have a son I love, a husband I love, and a father I love. I am so far, and sometimes people assume in my work I'm like a male basher, and it's like, what? No. But I will say this, and I don't hear a lot of men thinking that they're selfish for doing something to better their lives. That seems to
I
be
would agree with you. I think
right.
that's legacy of some misogyny and patriarchy that is sat in there, that we're responsible for all the things, but put ourselves last.
Well, and my husband and my neighbor, they were having a conversation. They're great friends. And I heard both of them use the term, well, I'm just going to relax for a little bit before I blank. And I was like, I have never heard a woman say that. I have never heard a woman, including myself, I mean, now I'm incorporating it into my life, but I was like, I've never heard a woman say, you know what? I'm just going to relax for a little bit before I, whatever.
We should add that to our vocabulary. That's
right.
I'm going to relax for a little bit. I'm going to use that tonight. Thanks.
Do it. I mean, yeah. And I was just like, because I heard my husband say it, and then I heard my neighbor say it. And these are both men who are highly functioning with jobs, who help with their kids. And I mean, all this, I was just like, huh, I've never heard. And I asked my husband, I was like, do other men say that? Like, I can relax for a little bit? And he's like, yeah. I was like,
sounds good.
Huh, I've never heard a woman say that. Like, I've never heard a woman, so we'll add it, Melissa. Yeah, we'll add it.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Okay, so let's focus the conversation. I am so glad we started with lead our kids by example, heal your own trauma. And I'm so glad you mentioned the trigger thing, because toxic people act like angry teenagers.
Yeah.
So when you are raising teenagers, and that's really your kids' ages, that's really where I see it hit the fan with a lot of my clients. And
right. And then you have the typical teenage behaviors, and then you're constantly questioning yourself, would this exist anyway? Is this typical teenage behavior, or is this a legacy of over here? And I think it's both. And the reality is it certainly wouldn't be as well in some kids. There are some extreme behaviors, so it is hard. You just have to deal with the actual effects of it, I think.
Yeah. So I'm glad we started there. But now let's talk about kids. Like, what do you see going wrong? What do you see as some of the aftermaths of having been in a toxic environment?
I mean, you start to see self-medicating behaviors, whether that's substance or other things, or
a lot of times it's technology.
Yeah,
I think right now for adults and kids.
Yeah, it's just ways of unhealthy coping. So you've got to set good boundaries there. You might end up dealing with like the juvenile court system, because of things happening there, or the school system. And so it can get really intense, where all of your time is suddenly dealing with the after effects of trauma and different things like that. So again, back to the self-care is so important. But yes, unhealthy coping, lashing out. So when you start to put those boundaries in place, be prepared for a lot more conflict. And you think when you leave the toxic relationship, you're like, I've left. It's all good. And now I can heal. But the reality is, as you heal and put in boundaries and healthy practices, these are completely new to your children who have not swum in these clean waters before. And they're like, I can't breathe. I'm used to this dirty water. So you have to be prepared for a lot more pushback, a lot more, hostility. Yeah, I mean, and just, it just takes a long time. Your survival. And I used to be judgmental in the sense of like, how could a woman leave her children? Or how could you accept, half custody, or, with an abusive or toxic person? But the reality is, you have to survive. As this gets more intense, or, they're still swimming in some of that water. I mean, it can be pretty bad, and you have to be able to survive to eventually help your kids survive.
I like to think about the term bullying. Okay. I think that's such like a fair game term, like kind of, we kind of know what bullying is. And it's like, at some point, it's like, if it would get you suspended out of school, if it would get you fired from work, if it would get you arrested in some
Right.
of these situations, like, but then sometimes women, it's like, oh man, my child is bullying me. And I see it a lot. I
Yeah.
mean, I see it a lot. And kids are violent towards their parents sometimes, I mean, just really, and then these moms have all this guilt, like, I don't even like my kid right now. It's like, well, I, that your kid would get arrested if they did that as an
Yeah.
adult.
And the hard part is you have empathy because this is your child that you love. And also you have empathy because they were in the same situation you were in. And so you go, I know what, what was modeled for them and what was programmed into them. So on some level, you're like, this isn't necessarily their fault. And so, I mean, you need to provide as best as you can the resources and, helping them understand what has happened to them and understand abuse, understand behaviors. I mean, don't be afraid to, if in an age appropriate way, call behaviors what they are. Help them understand this is what blame shifting is. This is what gaslighting is. This is what verbal abuse is. So you can call it what it is. But I think, dark things grow in the dark. And so when this is kept in the dark and kept secret, I mean, that's one of the things that is so destructive, is to say, oh, this is a family matter. It's a private matter. To make sure you bring people into your sphere, whether it's the therapists, whether it's, counselors at school, whether it's your close friends, if you've been trained to believe, oh, I shouldn't talk about this. And I don't want people to, probably in the past it was, I don't want people to think badly of my spouse. So you don't talk about the bad things that are happening. And now it may be, I don't want people to think badly of my children. And so, obviously you should have discretion about who you talk to things about, but people need to know what's happening. And, you need to feel a level of protection and safety that people do know. I mean, you can even go to the point of, I've said before, I'm willing to stand by anything I say or do. I'd be fine to walk with a camera on me at all times. I'm not a perfect person, definitely not a perfect person. But we should all be, the healthy thing is to be able to own any of our mistakes. If we say something that's not appropriate, or, to say, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. Sorry. How can I make that better? But even having cameras. So if you've been gaslit for a long time.
I do have cameras in my house.
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
If you've been gaslit for a long time, you want to be able to go back. And I think, I saw a Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith at one point that had Dr. Romney on it, and said, one of the top signs.
I've seen that. Yep.
Yes, that you have been in a narcissistic relationship or been gaslit for a long time is that you feel the need to record everything. Mm-hmm. And, do that for as long as you need to be honest, mm-hmm. Because mm-hmm. that provides a sense of safety.
Mm-hmm. Well, it absolutely does. It's so important. And I can't tell you how many women I've talked to who were sexually abused by a family member, and the mothers didn't believe them or do anything about it, whether it be a step parent or uncle, older step sibling, whatever it was, right? I can't tell you how many women I've talked to that's happened to. And that was very much what they told themselves to not have to do anything about it. Like, well, it's a family matter. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a family matter. Well, it's a family matter. And we're in a very new revolution of really, I just want to say, like, how normal that used to be.
Right.
Like,
right.
That was how our great grandparents were raised. That was how our grandparents were raised. That was probably how our parents were raised. Right. And so we are the generation right now. What's happening right now are the people finally saying, whoa, let's, what I loved your phrase, what happens in the dark grows in the dark. Is
Mhm.
that we said? Yeah. I love that phrase. We are the very first in humankind
Right.
generation that's saying, no, that's not what's supposed to be happening.
And there's a healing that happens when people can look at you that weren't even involved in what happened and say, what happened to you is not okay.
Yeah.
What happened to you is not right. And I'm sorry that it happened to you. And, I mean, I think that one of the hardest things is that we look for that in people that we may never get it from.
Mhm.
But getting it from some people who care, and who know what's happening, and that's part of your healing. And I think we all need that.
Absolutely. So what else, what are some of your other thoughts on helping our kids through this? Any specific examples or resources that come to mind?
I mean, one thing I was thinking about was that, you know, always tell the truth to your children, but balance the amount of information. And, one of the things that, that I've always ascribed to is, I can tell them and do tell them that's not information you need to know. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not even going to white lie and say, oh, well, I was at, this place, when actually I was, dealing with this issue with their school or, whatever else. So it's okay to say, I'm not going to give you that information. You don't need to know that. It's great boundary. It's great practice. But to tell them the truth and, document still, when you're coming out of a toxic relationship, documentation is, and like you said, the video is really helpful. But then even, dealing with parenting and situations with your kids, document it. Yeah, it's a journey. That's what I'm learning, especially.
Yeah.
It's a long, hard journey, and putting all those things into place so that you can survive and move forward.
One of my favorite phrases is, I don't let people talk to me that way anymore.
Yes, yes.
Right? Because it's like, okay, I know we used to be in dirty water. Like, I
Mhm.
know the water used to be dirty. I'm over here in the clean water. So now there are new sets of rules for
Right.
how I interact with people and allow them to interact with me.
Yes. Yeah. I don't have friends who treat me badly anymore.
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
have one-sided relationships anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that's great to model for your children. Like, this is what healthy looks like. Or, sometimes I say, okay, here's what you said. This would have been a great healthy response. Or even if it
Mhm.
was me who said something that wasn't great, here, I should have said this. I'm
Mhm.
sorry I said that. This is what I
Yeah.
should have said.
Mhm.
But I think I learned a lot from my own therapist,
Yeah.
who I had to go in, and she said, here's what I hear you saying. This is what a healthy partner would have said. And really connecting those dots of like, oh, and helping your kids connect those dots too.
Mhm. And sometimes it can even be, so I worked and did a mental health campaign for teens before I did this work. There was in my area, there was a girl who was shot and killed by her boyfriend. Her name was Emma Walker, and she was a cheerleader, just beautiful. He was like this all-star football player, and he was controlling and jealous, and there were a lot of concerns about the relationship. Not blaming anyone, like they tried, like it was just a terrible situation. Um, her parents and other important people certainly tried, but he ended up getting a gun and shooting her in her bed. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible. There's like a dateline on it. It's very widely pronounced. So I did a mental health campaign for teens. After that, and worked within that school system. So to give you some context, like in the listeners' context on my experience with teens, because of what I'm about to say is, I mean, sometimes it can even be, you can model good behavior. And sometimes with teens, it can be like, do you want to try that again? Like, they say something mean.
Right, right.
They probably know that they said something mean. And it's like, okay, let's start over on that one. I'm just going to like, and hit the
I'm going to give
reset.
you a do-over.
I'm going to give you the do-over. Yes. Yeah. Do you want to try that again?
Yeah. But you bring up something important, and that is, education of teens, and I can say especially teenage girls who are trying to understand what it feels like to be loved or cared about, and sometimes, doing things that aren't healthy in order to try to get that. And I think learning about, there's a new law in the UK against coercive control, and we don't have, the laws
in California. There's in California, and maybe Nebraska. Don't. I know California. That's from a lawyer. There's one other state. Yeah.
There's still too much focus on that domestic violence or abuse is the physical effects. And, I feel like our whole society needs to do a better job of explaining, no, that's really the last 10%.
So I describe it as stage 4 cancer, right? So when we think about like domestic violence is like stage 4 cancer. So if in our fight against cancer, we were only addressing it at its stage 4 stage, it's a lot of stages, that would be crazy. Like we talk about precancerous cells, we talk about cancer prevention, we talk about, getting mammograms and skin cancer checks and all these things to try to get things in stage 1 and stage 2. And I think we could really, I'm trying to help the conversation around coercive control and manipulation and bullying and controlling relationships and abuse and toxic and narcissism and whatever else. In thinking about it, let's go back to state like precancerous cells in stage 1. By the time we're in stage 4 cancer, I don't want to say it's too late, because that's not, but it's a really unrealistic look.
Right. I mean, that's where you're in the ER. I mean, and do we really want to deal with, something by the time people are in the ER and on life support? Because I'll tell you, I've had so many women who have never been physically abused, and they're literally on life support. I was on life support. And it's part of that is crazy making, because you can't make sense of, historically we've been taught that this is what it looks like. It looks like you've been choked or bruises and different things like that.
Well, even they talk about domestic violence awareness. And I was like, do we really need an awareness project to know you shouldn't hit your family members? Like,
but I really do think like people understanding that violence isn't necessarily physical violence, like violent words and gaslighting and things like that to control people. It is a very violent and intimate. People also don't understand that things like intimidation and, I call it bowing up on somebody. If your partner is constantly bowing up on you, that is domestic violence.
As defined, I know by my local police station. Like when you look up domestic violence, if you've not looked up in your local area, like what is domestic violence, that is on the list. It's in my local police station area. So that can be helpful, because it's like, these people on this podcast are talking about are people a domestic violence advocate, but that's in my, creating a culture of fear.
Right. Yeah. It's a culture of fear. It's, I was at an appointment one time, and I think, they have those list of questions. Are you safe at home? I think was the question. Well, I frankly, I just told her, I said, I think most people would say I'm safe at home. A better question is, are you ever afraid of your partner? If you are on a regular basis afraid of your partner, or afraid of your child, or, that is the key to go, wait, there's something very, very wrong here.
I love this. Melissa, tell people where they can find out more about you and your work.
They can find me on my blog at melissajhogan.com. Also, I write on Medium some under Melissa J. Hogan. And if they want to learn more about medical trauma, and it really relates to all trauma in children and ways to help children, they can pick up my book. Let's see, There we go.
Put it right in front of your face. Yeah.
It's on Amazon and all the places. Also, they can go to afraidofthedoctor.com, which helps kids dealing with medical anxiety, which is a huge issue right now with COVID. I love and want our kids to be healthy. And so that's what I'm really passionate about.
I love it. Melissa J. Hogan, thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Thank you.